It was September in Jinling. This ancient city had been a battlefield for dynasties, a place where countless heroes were buried beneath monuments of history. Even now, as a bustling metropolis, you could still feel the weight of the past in the air. I sat in the back of a black business car, watching the news on the built-in monitor. The official announcement was everywhere. Chu Jingzhe had been appointed governor of the southern border. People were losing their minds. He wasn't even 30 yet. The name Chu Jingzhe was a legend. I joined the army at 16. By 20, I was a commander leading the most elite force in the country. At 26, I stood at the head of 100 generals, known to the world as the Azura god of war. A year ago, at Wolf Valley, the enemy had pressed 1.2 million troops against our border. I led 800,000 men to meet them. I even had a black coffin forged for myself and carried it to the front lines. It was a bloodbath. We lost half our men, but we crushed the enemy's spirit for the next century. When it was over, I knelt facing my homeland, silent as the world watched in awe. I reached out and clicked the TV off. Hundreds of thousands of my brothers died to put me on this pedestal. This title of governor? I didn't want it. Boss, where to? My driver asked. His name was Su Feng. He was my personal guard and a brother who had bled with me through a dozen wars. Home, I said. Directly. It had been 10 years. Jinling, I was back. Everyone was talking about Chu Jingzhe, but I wondered if anyone remembered the name Chuyu. That was my birth name. My old mentor had given me the name Chu Jingzhe when he sent me off to enlist. He told me Chuyu sounded too soft. He chose Jingzhe, the day of the awakening of insects, because he saw me as a hidden dragon. One day, I would wake up and shake the world. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through messages from 6 months ago. Each word felt like a needle in my heart. Brother, come back. Dad isn't going to make it. Brother, we're bankrupt. That traitor Jiang Wenli teamed up with the 4 families to steal everything. Brother, Mom had an accident. They won't stop. I'm so scared. The messages were from my sister, Lin Xiyu. I was in the heat of battle when she sent them. I never saw them. I was the Lin family's adopted son, but my parents had raised me as their own. Even after Xiyu was born, their love for me never wavered. While I was shedding blood for the country, someone was butchering my family. My fists clenched so hard my nails dug into my palms. We pulled into the Luoxiao Lake Villa district. This was where the elite lived, surrounded by mountains and water. The car stopped in front of a familiar gate. I jumped out before Su Feng could even park. The gate was broken. Weeds choked the garden. This place used to be full of life, but now it was a tomb. I stopped at the front door, my heart hammering. I didn't know how to face her. Boss, Su Feng whispered behind me. Let's go, I said, taking a sharp breath. I pushed the door open. Every corner of the courtyard sparked a memory. I saw the peach tree we planted when I was 8. It was thick now, probably beautiful when it bloomed. Xiyu used to love it. I saw the monkey-shaped rock she made me carry home from the river when I was 10. Everything was the same, yet everything had changed. Suddenly, I heard shouting from inside. I sprinted toward the living room. A young woman sat in a wheelchair, her back to the door. She was skeletal, her skin sallow, and her eyes hollow. She looked like a ghost waiting to die. In front of her were 2 memorial tablets and 2 black and white photos hanging on the wall. Her hands trembled as she lit 3 sticks of incense. Lin Xiyu, this villa belongs to me now, a fat man barked. He had a gold chain around his thick neck and 2 thugs behind him. You have 30 minutes to pack your trash and get out. Xiyu didn't even flinch. She slowly placed the incense into the burner. Her face was a mask of cold emptiness. And take these tablets and photos with you. The fat man sneered. They're bad luck. Son the third. Shiyu's voice was raspy, filled with a quiet, burning hate. If my father hadn't pitted you and given you work, you'd still be a nobody. He's only been gone 6 months, and you're already a lapdog for our enemies. In 1 year, she had lost everything. Her fiancé, Jiang Wenli, had betrayed her. The 4 families had dismantled the Lin Empire. Her parents were dead, and the nightmare wasn't over. People mocked her, insulted her, and finally, they broke her legs to keep her from standing back up. She lived in total darkness now. Hope was a foreign concept. It all started when our father, Lin Qingfeng, fell ill. Xiyu took over the business, but she was young. She trusted Jiang Wenli to help her. Instead, He stole our trade secrets and handed them to the vultures. He was the one who pulled the rug out from under us. The enemy's plan had been flawless. They attacked from both the inside and the outside, and Shiyu never stood a chance. In just a few days, the Lin family empire collapsed. When my father, Lin Qingfeng, heard the news, his condition worsened. He died in the hospital shortly after. Most of our family's assets fell into the hands of the four families, and the rest were snatched up by that traitor, Jiang Wenli. I used to call you Miss Lin, Sun the Third sneered, his face twisted with arrogance. But the Lin family is gone. You're just a cripple now. What right do you have to talk to me like that? A fallen phoenix is worse than a chicken, Shiyu. Can't you see how things are? He was enjoying this. Years ago, he had to beg my father for a job, but the moment we fell, he was the first to kick us while we were down. He crawled to the four families and Jiang Wenli, wagging his tail. He called it being smart. Shiyu looked at him with hollow eyes. Her voice was weak but stubborn. What else is there for me to lose? I tried to be polite, but you don't know what's good for you, Sun growled. He turned to his thugs. Throw her out. And get rid of those tablets and photos. They're bad luck. Touch them, and I'll slaughter your entire bloodline. A cold, piercing voice echoed from the doorway. It was a sound so freezing it felt like it crawled up from the depths of hell. Everyone froze as Sun turned around and saw a tall, imposing man in a black coat standing there. A massive, muscular man stood behind him. Sun felt a flicker of recognition, but he couldn't place the face. I looked at Sun, my gaze like a blade. He shivered, his scalp going numb. I ignored him and walked over to the wheelchair. I knelt down and took Shiyu's skeletal, freezing hands in mine. Shiyu, I whispered. It's me. Your brother is back. Her thin hands trembled. Her eyes stayed dim and lifeless, her expression frozen in a mask of numbness. You're not my brother. My brother died in the war. If he had received my letters, he would have come home. My heart felt like it was being shredded by 1,000 knives. Red crept into my eyes as guilt and rage washed over me. I remembered the innocent little girl who used to follow me everywhere, calling for her big brother. We weren't blood-related, but she was more of a sister to me than anyone else. I remembered her eyes most of all. They used to shine like black pearls. Now, they were empty. Even Su Feng, standing behind me, felt a lump in his throat. I remember when you were little, I said softly. You loved it when I braided your hair. When you were sick and refused to take medicine, I had to promise to let you use me as a human chair before you'd swallow it. And when you lost your first tooth, I teased you about the way you talked, and you didn't speak to me for days. Slowly, a spark flickered in Shiyu's hollow eyes. Tears began to stream down her face. Brother, she sobbed. She hadn't cried once since our parents died, no matter how much pain she endured. But now, the dam broke. I held her tight, fighting back my own tears. I'm sorry I'm late, Shiyu, I told her. From now on, no one in this world will ever hurt you again. I will protect you. She reached out with her thin hands to touch my face. It had been 10 years. She had almost forgotten what I looked like. Oh, I see who it is now, Sun interrupted, his ugly sneer returning. He used to call me young master, with every breath, but now his true colors were out. It's the Lin family's stray dog, Chu Jingzhe. Now that your fake parents are dead, you really are just a stray. Before he could finish, a shadow flashed. Su Feng was a blur of motion. Before Sun could react, a massive hand clamped around his throat and lifted his fat body off the ground. You're looking for death, Su Feng hissed. His killing intent was suffocating. To him, I was a god, and he wouldn't let a worm like Sun insult me. Are you idiots standing around for? Sun wheezed, his face turning purple. His two thugs rushed forward, but they didn't even get close. Su Feng sent them flying with a single kick each. They hit the floor and didn't move. You dare touch me? Sun gasped, struggling for air. Do you know who is backing me? Su Feng's grip tightened. I don't just dare to hit you. I dare to kill you. Want to try me? Sun finally felt true terror. A fear from the depths of his soul took hold. He was seconds away from having his neck snapped when I spoke. Let him live for now, I said calmly. Su Feng dropped him like a sack of garbage. He grabbed the two unconscious thugs by their collars and dragged them outside. He knew I didn't want them staining the floor. Sun lay there, gasping for air, trembling as he looked at me. He couldn't believe how much I had changed in 10 years. The pressure I radiated was terrifying. I ignored him and walked toward the memorial tablets. I knelt down with a heavy thud. 9 kowtows. Each one rang out like thunder. I have never knelt to heaven or earth, but I would always kneel for the parents who raised me. I lit 3 sticks of incense, one for their past, one for their present, and one for their afterlife. I looked at their photos. Father, I said softly, you always wanted me to make something of myself. Well, I'm back. Look at this glory. I hope it's enough for you. I unbuttoned my black overcoat. It slid to the floor, revealing a deep green military uniform. On my shoulders, 4 golden stars glittered under the lights. The air in the room turned heavy. Even a commoner knew what those 4 stars meant. In the 100-year history of our nation, no one my age had ever reached this rank. I was a 4-star general, a living legend, and I was finally home. Lin Shiyu's tears fell faster now, splashing onto the dusty floor. She couldn't wrap her head around it. Her brother, the boy who left 10 years ago, was now a great general. I knelt before the memorial tablets, my heart feeling like it was being shredded by 1,000 blades. 10 years ago, we said goodbye. I never imagined it would be forever. I had come back to find my parents gone, separated from me by the boundary of life and death. I was a bad son, I whispered. I didn't even see you one last time. Tears escaped my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I used 2 bursts of inner energy to shatter them before they could track down my face. A man shouldn't cry easily, but the grief was a mountain on my chest. Still, I didn't want my little sister to see me break. Sun was shaking so hard his teeth rattled. He couldn't believe it. He had spent the last decade bullying people, only to provoke a man who had become a god of war. To say he was looking for death was an understatement. With my current rank, his wealth and background meant nothing. Even if every wealthy family in Jinling banded together, they wouldn't weigh as much as my pinky finger. Light incense for my parents first, I said, my voice cold and flat. Then, I'll send you on your way. The words made Sun freeze. His scalp went numb. Part of him desperately wanted to believe I was a fake, but his instincts told him the truth. No one would be stupid enough to impersonate a 4-star general. He hesitated, but his legs suddenly gave out. He slammed into the floor, kneeling. Su Feng had appeared behind him like a ghost. Sun tried to struggle, to stand back up, but I stepped forward. I placed my boot firmly on his back. He tried to brace himself with his hands, but the pressure was absolute. His forehead slammed into the ground with a sickening thud. You deserve this, Lin Shiyu said, her voice trembling with anger. My father saw you struggling years ago and gave you a chance. He promoted you. But you teamed up with the 4 great families and bit the hand that fed you. Even a dog knows how to guard a house for its master. You're just a cold-blooded wolf. I stared at the 2 sticks of incense in my hand. My hatred was a physical thing. I wanted to tear him apart. With a flick of my wrist, the incense flew from my fingers like bolts of lightning. 2 wet thuds followed. The bamboo sticks pierced straight through the backs of Sun's hands and pinned them deep into the floorboards. Blood surged out. Sun let out a blood-curdling scream. He tried to pull away, but his hands wouldn't obey. The sticks had severed the tendons and nerves perfectly. He was stuck, forced to watch as the incense slowly burned down. Hot ash fell onto his skin, adding a searing sting to the agony. When those burn out, I said, I'll kill you myself. Sun's face went pale. He knew I wasn't joking. He didn't have the courage to look me in the eye anymore. You can't kill me, he stammered, desperate for a lifeline. The 4 great families won't let you get away with it. I didn't even blink. Soon, the 4 great families will no longer exist. I turned away, leaving him to rot on the floor. I walked over to Shiyu and pushed her wheelchair out into the courtyard. Looking around the estate, my heart grew heavier. When the Lin family fell, the people we had helped didn't stand up for us. They kicked us while we were down. Even the servants had looted the place and vanished the moment they smelled trouble. It wasn't just theft, it was a daylight robbery. When the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. I was seeing the darkest parts of human nature today. The 4 great families had planned the downfall, but the real traitor was Jiang Wenli, that ungrateful beast. He and every other person who betrayed my family would pay. It's my fault, Shiyu sobbed, her head hanging low. If I hadn't trusted Jiang Wenli, Mom and Dad would still be here. Don't think like that, I interrupted, my voice softening. I'm back now. In this entire world, no one will ever bully you again. I promise you, every single person who hurt us will pay a price they can't afford. Not one of them gets a pass. I pulled out a cigarette. Sufeng was there instantly with a lighter. I took a long drag and looked at my sister. Shiyu, you've suffered so much these last few months. I'm fine, she whispered, biting her lip. I knew she was lying. The pain in her eyes was too deep to hide. What happened to your legs? I asked. She looked down and stayed silent. I didn't push her. We went back inside the hall. The incense had burned to the stubs. Sun's hands were a charred, bloody mess. I felt no pity. Please, please spare me, Sun begged, his head hitting the floor over and over. Even a maggot wants to live, and Sun was no different. Did you think about mercy when you were acting as a dog for the four families? I asked. A flash of cold light cut through the air. A thin red line appeared across Sun's throat. He tried to scream, but it sounded like a broken bellows. Blood sprayed across the floor. He collapsed, his eyes wide with a terror that would never leave them. Clean this up, I told Sufeng. Once he left, it was just me and Shiyu. I pushed her through the villa, through every room and hallway. Everything was familiar, yet everything had changed. It felt like 10 years of memories were crashing into me at once. My family wasn't originally from Jinling. We came from the capital, Longdu. My father, Lin Xingfeng, had built this empire from nothing with his own intelligence. That success made the local powers nervous. They conspired to bring us down, and Jiang Wenli was their inside man. After the fall, the Jiang family, once nobody, became the new elites of Jinling. Jiang Wenli had seized our assets and publicly mocked Shiyu. He told everyone he never loved her. He only wanted the Lin property. He had thrown her out like trash. My fists clenched until my knuckles turned white. My killing intent was a physical weight in the room. Those bastards hadn't stopped at stealing our money. They had broken Shiyu's legs, leaving her for dead. She only survived because her friend, Ten Xiao, had cared for her for 3 months straight, defying the four families to bring her food and supplies. I remembered Tan Xiao. She was a good girl, but 10 years is a long time. It was time to see who was still a friend and who was a target. I remembered Tan Xiao as a gentle, kind girl. By now, she had likely grown into a beautiful woman. Regardless of how much time had passed, I, Chu Jingjia, would never forget the kindness she showed my sister. I lived by a simple code. If you cross me, I will repay you 10-fold, 100-fold. But if you help me, I will return the favor like a gushing spring. I looked down at Shiyu. Are you hungry? I'll cook for you. Shiyu nodded eagerly. When we were kids, our parents were always busy with the business. Even though we had servants, she always preferred my cooking. Just wait a moment, I said softly. It won't take long. I headed to the kitchen and found the fridge stocked with fresh ingredients. I whipped up a few simple dishes and brought them to the table. I sat across from her, personally filling her bowl and piling it high with food. I watched her eat in silence, a vow forming in my mind. For the rest of my life, I wouldn't let anyone lay a finger on her. If they touched a single hair on her head, I would wipe out their entire bloodline. Few people in this world would ever see the southern wilderness governor, a man who commanded legions, act this tenderly. Shiyu was the only one. A short while later, Sufeng returned. I didn't ask him how he handled the bodies. I trusted his competence. Sit down and eat, I said, gesturing to the chair next to me. Sufeng looked overwhelmed. In the military hierarchy, very few people were ever granted the honor of sharing a meal at the same table as me. After we finished, I pulled Sufeng aside. Have 5 spirit tablets custom-made. Yes, sir, he replied respectfully before heading back out. I took Shiyu back out to the courtyard. The warm sunlight washed over us, and for the first time in years, she looked like she felt safe. Brother, she asked tentatively, I heard there was a massive war in the southern border a year ago. Were you okay? I gave her a gentle smile. I'm fine. Look at me. I'm as strong as an ox. But as my eyes fell on her wheelchair, my heart twisted. In truth, after 10 years of war, even I couldn't count how many scars I carried. Every medal on my chest had been paid for with blood and sweat. Brother, I'm a little tired, Shiyu whispered. Can you take me upstairs to sleep? I nodded and carried her to her room, tucking her into bed. Rest easy. I'll be right here. I held her hand, quietly circulating my internal energy. I felt a wisp of pure chi flow from my palm into her body. She was far too weak. If I didn't intervene, her health would eventually collapse. Shiyu's expression relaxed as the warmth spread through her. Soon, she fell into a deep, peaceful sleep. It had been a long time since she felt secure enough to close her eyes like this. Even in sleep, she gripped my hand tight, terrified that if she let go, her only remaining family would vanish again. When Su Feng returned, he stood by the door and whispered, "Governor." I signaled for him to stay quiet. I gently tucked Shiyu's hand under the covers and stepped out, closing the door softly behind me. "The items are ready, sir," Su Feng said. "Bring them to the study." I walked into the room where I had spent my youth. It looked exactly the same as it did 10 years ago. Shiyu's old school awards were still pinned to the wall, and her favorite calligraphy brush sat on the desk. I prepared the ink, picked up the brush, and began to write. My strokes were sharp and powerful, like blades cutting through the paper. I wrote 4 names onto 4 separate spirit tablets. The first name was Zhang Zhenlin. If anyone in Jinling saw this, they would be horrified. Zhang Zhenlin was the patriarch of the Zhang family, one of the 4 great powers of the city. He, along with the heads of the Yang, Chun, and Sun families, had conspired with Jiang Wenli to destroy the Lin family. "They should be honored. The governor is writing their names personally," Su Feng remarked, looking at the tablets. I set the brush down. "Since I'm back, I should send them a greeting gift." "Rest assured, sir. I'll handle it personally," Su Feng promised. I had only brought Su Feng with me officially, but I knew my shadows were watching from the dark. Not that I needed protection. There wasn't a man alive who could threaten me, but they were useful for running errands. "What else did you find?" I asked. "My subordinates just reported back," Su Feng said, his voice dropping. "Miss Shiyu's legs. They were broken by men sent by Zhang Peiyun, the daughter of the Zhang family." Killing intent flooded the room. It wasn't enough that they had ruined us. They had to be sadistic about it. I had underestimated how ugly human nature could get. "I've already notified Little Seven," Su Feng added. "He's heading here now to treat her legs." I nodded and lit a cigarette. "What are the 4 families doing tonight?" Since the Jinling Business Alliance was formed, they've been quiet. But Jiang Wenli is hosting a banquet tonight at the Longhao Hotel. All the wealthy heirs and family heads will be there. "Perfect," I said, exhaling a cloud of smoke. "I'll deliver the gift myself and introduce myself." As night fell like a great beast swallowing the city, I sat in the back of a black car, flipping through a ledger. I took out a pen and drew a red line through a name, Sun III. He was the first to go. The Longhao Hotel used to be a Lin family property. It was the only 6-star hotel in the city, but now it belonged to Jiang Wenli. I stood at the entrance, a tall, imposing figure in the shadows. I lit another cigarette, the small flame illuminating my cold, indifferent face. "Sir, for the likes of the 4 families, you shouldn't have to step onto the field," Su Feng said, draping a heavy coat over my shoulders. "I could crush them with a single hand." I shook my head. "I can delegate anything else, but not this. Besides, letting them die quickly would be too merciful. I had spent a decade bleeding on the front lines to protect this country. And yet, the very people I protected were the ones who turned into wolves and tore my family apart. My adoptive father, Lin Xingfeng, was the most important man in my life. I wouldn't let anyone else take his revenge for me. "I'm going in," I said. "Bring the gift in a moment." I walked toward the entrance, my back straight and my pace steady. Su Feng watched me go, his heart heavy. I had guarded the mountains and rivers of our nation for 10 years, but when my own family was in danger, there had been no one to guard them. Tonight was Jiang Wenli's night. The entrance was swarming with the city's elite, dressed in silks and furs. Jiang hadn't even set up a guest list. Anyone who looked wealthy enough could enter. Ever since he stole the Lin family fortune, he had been obsessed with charity to fix his reputation. It was a pathetic attempt to hide his crimes. I stepped through the doors. I wanted to see the man who had played with my sister's heart and built a throne out of my father's bones. I wanted to know exactly what kind of man Jiang Wenli was. He had teamed up with the 4 families to steal my family's legacy, and I needed to see the malice in his eyes for myself. "Sir, would you like something to drink?" a waitress asked. She held a tray and smiled politely. "No, Thank you, I said, giving her a small, courteous nod. The waitress hesitated, her eyes lingering on me for a second too long. In this room, everyone was a big shot from Jinling's high society, but my presence was different. Even in a simple black coat, I stood out. 10 years in the military had given me an edge that no amount of money could buy. I sat there in silence, yet I could feel the eyes of several women in the room drifting toward me. Who is that? He looks familiar, but I can't place him, someone whispered nearby. I don't know. He doesn't seem to be part of the usual Jinling circles. I ignored the chatter. I had spent years being the center of attention on battlefields and at military galas. I was numb to it. As the hall filled up, people began taking seats at my table. Xiao, look. He's so handsome, a young, energetic girl whispered. She was pointing right at me. The woman beside her, dressed in a rose-colored evening gown, rolled her eyes. Stop being such a fangirl, she started to say, but then her gaze landed on me. She froze. The girl, Tan Xiao, dragged her friend over to my table. I recognized her immediately and stood up to greet them. Xiao, it's been a long time, I said. She gasped, her face lighting up with shock. Chuyu? Is it really you? She seemed hesitant at first, but when I called her name, her excitement turned into something else, fear. She was an old classmate, and our families had been close. She knew exactly who I was. She also knew that this banquet was hosted by the man who had destroyed my family. She looked around nervously, clearly wanting to warn me to leave before things got ugly. Xiao, you know him? Her friend, Qin Miling asked. She was staring at me like I was some kind of masterpiece. We were classmates, Xiao explained quickly. He joined the army years ago. It's been 10 years? I nodded and pulled out chairs for them. 10 years. Time flies. I felt the weight of those words. Time was a cruel thing. It changed everything and allowed no way back. I didn't expect to see you here, Xiao said, pouring 3 cups of tea. Her smile was forced and shaky. Is it a bad surprise? I asked with a thin smile. Qin Miling didn't say a word. She just kept staring, clearly captivated by the gentleman persona I was projecting. But the peaceful moment didn't last. A slightly chubby man in a suit marched toward us, his eyes fixed on Xiao. When he saw how friendly we were being, his face twisted with jealousy. Xiao, there you are? I've been looking everywhere for you, he barked. Xiao didn't hide her disgust. What do you want, Daichin? We aren't that close. Daichin turned to me, his chin held high. You. Move. Find another seat. Why? I asked, keeping my expression perfectly calm. Because I want to sit here, he snapped, pointing at the floor. Is that reason enough? I leaned back slightly. Because you want to sit here, I have to leave? If I remember correctly, I was here first. Do you have any idea who I am? Daichin sneered, leaning over me. A lowlife like you doesn't compare to me. Get lost before I make you regret it. Before I could respond, Xiao stood up. Daichin, that's enough. Chuyu is my friend. You have no right to kick him out. Xiao, I'm just looking out for you, Daichin said, trying to sound concerned. Don't be fooled by some guy who looks decent but is probably a scumbag inside. I'd be a lot safer if you stayed away from me, she shot back. A woman sitting across from us, wearing heavy makeup and a revealing dress, suddenly stood up. Her name was Himanyu. She was a social climber who had been trying to get my attention all night, but I had completely ignored her. Now, she saw an opening. Young Master Dai, why waste your breath on someone so rude? She cooed, grabbing his arm and pulling him toward her. She looked at Xiao with a look of triumph. She wanted a rich husband, and if Xiao didn't want Daichin, she was happy to take him. Daichin sat down, but he wasn't finished with me. You look like a stranger, friend. Where do you work? He was testing me. He knew everyone who mattered in Jinling, and since he didn't recognize me, he assumed I was a nobody. I didn't bother answering, but Himanyu leaned into his ear, speaking loud enough for the whole table to hear. I heard he's just a soldier. Probably doesn't even have a real job. Daichin burst out laughing, his eyes filled with contempt. A soldier? And here I thought you might actually be someone. Listen, you need to have some self-awareness. A high-end banquet like this isn't for people like you. Himanyu smirked, emboldened by my silence. People who have nothing always try to show off the most. You're a peasant, and you should act like one. This place is out of your league. Daichin pointed toward the exit. You heard her. Get out. Now. I set my teacup down without a sound. My movements were slow, deliberate. I looked up, my gaze sweeping over Himanyu and Dai-chun like a cold wind. You two certainly have a lot to say, I said quietly. Himanyu didn't back down. She sneered, her face twisting with disdain. Did I say something wrong? Look at yourself. You aren't even qualified to carry my shoes. This is a banquet hosted by young Master Jiang. What right does a person like you have to be here? I didn't argue. Instead, I did something they never expected. Slap. In front of the entire stunned crowd, I raised my hand and caught Himanyu square across the face. The sound was sharp, echoing through the hall like a gunshot. 5 red finger marks blossomed on her cheek instantly. The room went dead silent. Himanyu froze, clutching her face as if her brain couldn't process what had just happened. You dared to hit me? She stammered, her voice trembling with rage. You filthy peasant. You actually. Slap. I didn't say a word. I just backhanded her across the other cheek. I'll kill you. I'll see you dead, she shrieked. Her eyes were swollen and bloodshot, her face distorted with a murderous frenzy. She had been pampered her whole life. To be struck twice in public was a humiliation she couldn't endure. I leaned in slightly, showing my white teeth in a dark, predatory smile. If you say one more word, I might actually kill you. That single sentence chilled the room. Himanyu gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. She wanted to scream, to curse, but the sheer pressure radiating from me choked the words in her throat. She lacked the courage to speak. The guests around us were speechless. No one could believe someone had the guts to cause a scene at Jiang Wenli's event. This man was courting death. Tan Xiaoxiao was panicked. She grabbed my arm, her eyes pleading. She knew if Jiang Wenli found out, I wouldn't leave this building alive. Dai-chun finally snapped out of his shock. Himanyu had been siding with him, and if he didn't speak up now, his reputation in Jinling would be ruined. How dare you? Dai-chun barked. You laid hands on Miss He. I order you to get on your knees and apologize right now. If your attitude is good enough, I might consider letting you live. I turned my cold gaze toward him. Dai-chun instinctively took a step back. He felt like 1,000 knives were pricking his skin. You really like sticking your neck out, don't you? I asked. Dai-chun felt a wave of dread, but he forced himself to stand tall. What are you going to do? Do you even know who I am? In all of Jinling, who dares to cross the Dai family? Himanyu, seeing her back up, found her voice again. Even without young Master Dai, I could have you killed 100 times with one phone call. Kneel. Kowtow to me now, and I might show mercy. Otherwise, you aren't walking out of here today. I acted as if they weren't even there. I turned to Xiao and pushed my empty cup toward her with a gentle smile. Could you pour me another cup of tea? You want to leave? Dai-chun roared, misinterpreting my calm. I haven't given you permission. Nobody moves. Xiao couldn't take it anymore. She stood up, her face flushed with anger. Dai-chun, you're going too far. You started this, and now you're making these ridiculous demands. Too far. Dai-chun laughed mockingly. Do you know the status of my family? I'm only asking for an apology because of you, Xiao. Otherwise. I cut him off, my voice dripping with irony. I'm new to the city, so I really don't know much about the Dai family. Maybe I should find some time to pay them a visit. Dai-chun sneered. A dog like you? You aren't even fit to step through our front door. The moment the words left his mouth, I moved. My hand blurred through the air. Crack. Dai-chun's body flew backward like a dry leaf caught in a gale. He soared over 10 meters through the air before slamming into the floor. When he stopped sliding, his face was a mask of blood. I had held back. If I hadn't, that single strike would have killed him 10 times over. Since that's the case, I said to the room at large, tell the head of the Dai family to come to my door and beg for forgiveness before noon tomorrow. I sat back down as if I had just swatted a fly. The hall was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. People looked at me like I was a lunatic. I had beaten a socialite, hospitalized the heir of the Dai family, and then demanded their patriarch come apologize to me? Where did this guy get his confidence? Himanyu scrambled over to help Dai-chun up. He looked pathetic, his eyes filled with a poisonous, burning hatred. A man of his status would never let this go. He was already planning how to make me suffer 100 times over. Chiyu, please, just go. Xiao whispered, her voice shaking. The Dai family is dangerous. I shook my head. I wasn't going anywhere. I came here to see Jiang Wenli, the man who was supposed to be my brother-in-law, the man who betrayed my family and built his empire on our ruins. I sat straight, ignoring the stares. Who is talking so big in my house? A cold, smooth voice drifted through the hall. A man in his late 20s walked in, wearing a custom-tailored suit. His gold-rimmed glasses gave him a sophisticated but predatory look. The moment he appeared, the remaining chatter died instantly. "Young Master Jiang is here," someone whispered. This was him, Jiang Wenli, the man who stepped over my family's corpses to become the new king of Jinling High Society. "Young Master Jiang, you have to help us," Daichin cried out, stumbling toward him. "I was just trying to talk to this guy, and he attacked us. He has no respect for you or this event. He's a beast," Manhwa added, her voice shrill. "Look at what he did to my face." Jiang Wenli nodded slowly. He walked over and stood directly across from me. "You're a new face. I don't believe we've met." I didn't look up from my tea. "Tonight is my banquet," Jiang Wenli continued, his voice dropping an octave. "Guests are always welcome, but causing trouble in my domain. What exactly is your intention?" The tension in the air was suffocating. Xiao Xiao kept trying to catch my eye, signaling me to run, but I ignored her. I just took another sip of tea. Seeing me ignore him completely, a flash of genuine anger crossed Jiang Wenli's face. It had been a long time since anyone had dared to disrespect him. "Where did this trash come from?" another man shouted, stepping up beside Jiang Wenli. This was Sun Yu, the youngest son of the powerful Sun family. "You're putting on an act in front of young Master Jiang? I order you to get on your knees and apologize, or else." "Or else what?" I asked, finally raising my eyes. "Or else you won't leave this place alive," Sun Yu hissed, his eyes cold. "Is that so?" As soon as I spoke, I flicked my wrist. My fingers moved like an arrow. A silver flash erupted from my hand, a small, sharp dining knife. Whoosh! The blade whistled through the air, a streak of cold light aimed straight at Sun Yu. Thwack! Sun Yu didn't even have time to blink. The knife tore clean through his throat, carrying enough momentum to pin him to the structural pillar behind him. He hung there, eyes wide, as blood began to spray against the wood. The 10-centimeter blade buried itself entirely into the concrete pillar. Only the hilt remained outside, vibrating with a low, metallic hum. Sun Yu's eyes bulged, staring at nothing as blood gushed from his throat in thick, rhythmic pulses. He tried to cover the wound with his hands, but it was useless. It all happened in a flash. Most people in the room didn't even realize what they were seeing until it was over. The banquet hall fell into a deathly silence. You could have heard a pin drop. You, how dare you?" The light in Sun Yu's pupils flickered with disbelief and terror before finally fading into a dull glaze. His body slumped and hit the floor with a heavy thud. The silence shattered into a chorus of screams. Socialites scrambled away from their tables, huddling in the corners of the room. Everyone was speechless, paralyzed by fear. Before this, they just thought I was arrogant and rude. None of them imagined I would actually commit murder in broad daylight, especially not the son of the powerful Sun family. Did I have a death wish? Beside me, Xiao Xiao and Meiling were pale with horror. Xiao Xiao's mind was racing. This was a disaster. She should have forced me to leave earlier. "Sorry, I suppose I used a bit too much force." My voice was calm, cutting through the shock like a cold breeze. I spoke as if I were genuinely apologizing for a minor mistake, but everyone knew it was no accident. The atmosphere grew heavy. No one dared to breathe. Dai Chun was drenched in a cold, sticky sweat, and Manhwa's legs were shaking so violently she could barely stand. They both began to back away slowly, terrified to stay near me. I didn't move. I sat there perfectly composed, as if killing Sun Yu was a trivial chore. I pulled out a tissue and wiped my hands with meticulous care, acting as if touching him had made me dirty. Then, I pulled out my ledger. I flipped to the page for the Sun family and drew a neat line through Sun Yu's name. Standing a few feet away, Jiang Wenli's eyes widened when he saw that book. His muscles tensed. He recognized the names on those pages. His own name was at the very top of the first page, followed by the heads of the 4 major families. Seeing me cross out Sun Yu's name made his skin crawl. A wave of intense unease washed over him. "Let me introduce myself," I said, looking up. "My surname is Chu. My given name is Yu." Chu. You. Jiang Wenli repeated the name. It sounded familiar, but he couldn't quite place it. If you can't remember, let me help you. I continued. Lin Shiyu is my sister. It was like a bolt of lightning hit him. A flash of panic flickered deep in Jiang Wenli's eyes. He was a man who had seen many storms, though, and he quickly masked his fear with a mask of composure. My words had triggered a memory. He had spent a lot of time with Shiyu, and she had mentioned her brother more than once. She told him her brother was serving in the southern border and hadn't returned in years. He had promised to come back for her wedding. Now that I was here, and after everything I had just done, it was clear I wasn't here for a celebration. The rest of the guests felt the shift in the air. Everyone knew how the Lin family had fallen, even if they were too afraid to talk about it. My intentions were obvious now. What they couldn't understand was why I would walk into the lion's den like this. Jiang Wenli was powerful now, backed by the four great families and the Jinling Business Alliance. Where did I get the nerve? Jiang Wenli took a few steps back. Whether it was guilt or fear, he couldn't maintain eye contact with me. He took a deep breath. I heard you joined the military. Are you discharged now? I didn't come here for small talk, I said plainly. Let's discuss the issues between us. Jiang Wenli flinched. My arrival was too sudden, and my style was too aggressive. I was like an ancient well, calm on the surface, but with deadly currents swirling beneath. We've never even met. What is there to talk about? He tried to sound steady, but his eyes kept darting around. Even though I hadn't raised my voice, he felt like a mountain was pressing down on him. How did my adoptive parents die? And how exactly did the Lin family go bankrupt? I tapped my fingers on the table in a rhythmic beat. With every tap, Jiang Wenli's nerves grew tighter. I don't want to talk about this right now, he stammered. I wasn't asking for your permission. My gaze turned sharp as a blade. Who do you think you are? A shrill voice interrupted. Look at yourself in a mirror. You want to talk? My son is a man of status. Are you even qualified? You think you're someone special, coming here and giving orders? A middle-aged woman draped in gold and jewels waddled over, planting herself in front of Jiang Wenli. This was Zheng Chunmei, Jiang's mother. She used to be a simple peasant woman, but after her son stole the Lin family's fortune, she had transformed into a noble woman. She spent her days flaunting her wealth and showing off, the very definition of a nouveau riche brat. Mom, go sit down, Jiang Wenli whispered, trying to pull her back. Son, with your status, you shouldn't be sitting at the same table as this nobody, she snapped. Have some self-respect. A mud-legged peasant like him doesn't belong in a place like this. Guards, throw this dog out of here. On her command, 6 or 7 security guards rushed in, brandishing batons. I rubbed my temples. I've always hated being interrupted when I'm speaking. I waved my hand casually, as if shooing away a fly. A sudden gust of force erupted from my palm. Before Zheng Chunmei could even blink, the guards were sent flying like leaves in a storm. Tables and chairs flipped. The sound of snapping bones echoed through the hall. The guards ended up 10 meters away, rolling on the floor and howling in pain. Through it all, I hadn't even stood up. I remained seated, looking perfectly refined and calm. The crowd stared, frozen in shock. Can we talk now? I asked. The message was clear. If this wasn't enough, I was happy to do more. I'm warning you, Jiang Wenli said, his voice trembling. The Lin family is gone. You should weigh your own strength before you try to oppose me. He was desperately trying to find a way out of this crisis. I ignored his warning. I just stared at him with eyes that felt like knives. He felt like he was being hunted by a wild beast. His bravado crumbled. The Lin family's bankruptcy had nothing to do with me. He lied, his voice cracking. Why are you asking me? I was heartbroken when your parents passed away. The business failed because of poor management. It's been a long time. I let out a cold, meaningful laugh, but I didn't say a word. I just kept watching him. Jiang Wenli finally regained a bit of his composure. He tried to stand taller, acting as if he hadn't just been trembling. Is that so? I asked. My voice was lazy, but it carried a sharp edge of interrogation. I poured myself another cup of tea, the steam rising between us. If you were truly so heartbroken, let me ask you this. Why was Lin Shiyu the only one who handled the funeral arrangements for her parents? You were her fiancé. What exactly were you doing back then? I Jiang Wenli stammered. His mouth hung open, but no words came out. He was completely trapped. I gave him a fleeting, cold glance. I imagine you were quite busy. Busy swallowing up the Lin family's assets, wasn't it? I was not. Jiang Wenli roared. His face paled, his voice cracking with a desperate denial. Then explain why the majority of the Lin family's properties are now in the hands of your Jiang family. This time, Jiang Wenli went completely silent. He had no defense left. Stop talking nonsense. Zheng Chunmei snapped, stepping forward to protect her son. She couldn't stand seeing him cornered like this. What does the Lin family's downfall have to do with us? It's Lin Qingfeng's own fault. He made too much dirty money over the years, and this is his karma. He deserved to die. A flicker of killing intent ignited deep in my eyes. I turned my gaze toward her. There are some things you shouldn't say. If you do, you might lose your life. Who do you think you're scaring? She sneered. The moment the words left her mouth, I flicked my fingers. A blinding flash of light erupted from my fingertips and shot toward her. She gasped, clutching her chest as if she couldn't breathe. Her body lurched, and she nearly collapsed, saved only by Jiang Wenli grabbing her arm. You have 30 minutes of life left, I said. My tone was flat, as if I were mentioning the weather. I suggest you cherish them. The calmness of my voice was more terrifying than a scream. It was a death sentence, plain and simple. What did you do to me? Zheng Chunmei shrieked, her face twisted in pure terror. I didn't bother answering her. I don't have a habit of talking to the dead. I was waiting for an explanation from the living. I had 2 reasons for killing her. First, she insulted my deceased parents. Second, since Jiang Wenli destroyed the Lin family, I wanted him to experience the pain of losing a loved one. Heaven has a cycle of retribution. No one gets away forever. You're just killing the innocent, someone shouted from the crowd. Aren't you afraid of karma? I shook my head slowly. I don't agree with that. If karma existed, beasts like you would have been in hell a long time ago. I let my fingers sweep across the room, pointing at several people in the crowd. They instinctively recoiled, hiding behind one another. Since heaven won't act, I will be the one to take your lives. The air in the hall turned heavy, almost frozen. Some people looked horrified, others looked intrigued, but I remained the only one completely at ease. Chuyu, what do you actually want? Jiang Wenli asked. He looked at his mother's deathly pale face, and for the first time, true fear took hold. His back was soaked with cold sweat. I stood up slowly, my eyes burning with lethal intent. A year ago, you hid your true nature to get close to Shiyu. You won her trust. 6 months ago, you stole the Lin family's trade secrets and conspired with the 4 major families. You worked with them from the inside to tear the Lin family apart. I lit a cigarette and took an elegant drag. The thin veil of smoke blurred the sharp lines of my face. Then, you carved up the Lin family assets with those 4 families and transformed yourself into a member of high society, I continued. I rarely spoke this much, but the fire in my heart demanded it. The 4 families were already watching the Lin family like vultures, but with a traitor like you helping them, the plan was flawless. It was almost impressive. Presumptuous. Where did this mad dog come from? A young man shouted, standing tall with a look of fury. How dare you slander the Qin family? You're looking for death. This was Chun Zihao, a rising star of the Qin family. His father, Chun Jianlong, was the current head of their house. I turned my head slowly to look at him. Is that so? If the Qin family is so honorable, I'd love to know one thing. Machin Technology was originally registered by Lin Shiyu. Why is it now a Qin family asset? Chun Zihao's eyes darted away. His bravado vanished instantly, replaced by a panicked expression. The crowd began to whisper. Many were just here for the drama, but others were starting to realize that the accidental collapse of the Lin family was a setup. He stayed silent for a long time. I didn't let him off the hook. You were so loud and confident a second ago. Why are you quiet now? Who do you think you are? Chun Zihao hissed, trying to force a comeback. What right do you have to question the Chun family's business? Despite his words, he was trembling. My presence was a physical weight on him. He felt as if someone was clutching his throat, making it hard to breathe. He backed away into the crowd until he felt he could draw a full breath again. I turned my attention back to Jiang Wenli. I'm still waiting for your explanation. Jiang Wenli's heart tightened. Everything I have. I earned through my own hard work. I poured my blood and sweat into the Lin family. Without me, they would have fallen even sooner. Besides, I'm Shiyu's fiancé. What right do you have to question me? He was trying to convince himself as much as the crowd. It sounded logical on the surface, but knowing what he'd done, it was sickening. I laughed softly. Earned it? You mean you stole it? And you keep calling yourself Shiyu's fiancé. Tell me, after her legs were paralyzed, did you care for her? Did you visit her even once? I raised my voice, the sound echoing through the hall. You spent the wealth you stole from the Lin family while publicly mocking my sister. You called her lowly and trash at every turn. I walked toward him, one step at a time. You're a poisonous beast. You've truly disgusted me. Jiang Wenli hung his head like a defeated rooster. He was panicking now. He had been high profile for the last 6 months because he thought no one was left to stand up for the Lin family. He and the 4 families had made sure no one dared to speak the truth. Did you think the Lin family was truly gone? Or did you think no one could punish you? I asked. Countless times. I planned to cut you all into 1,000 pieces the moment I returned. The room went cold. No one thought I was joking. Chen Zihao and Jiang Wenli looked like they were made of ice. But I've changed my mind, I said. Killing you now would be too easy. Death isn't the most terrifying thing. The most terrifying thing is waiting for it. I wanted them to watch as the god of death approached them, step by step, while they remained powerless to stop it. I hadn't come here to slaughter everyone tonight. I just wanted them to know that I was back. It was time to pay the debt. Arrogant. Chen Zihao barked, finally finding his voice again after being humiliated. The Lin family's fall has nothing to do with us. You think you can touch the Chen family? You're a fool playing with fire. I frowned slightly. Some people just never learned. I raised my right hand. I spread my fingers wide, studying them with a calm focus while the silence in the room grew heavy. I'm actually looking forward to it, I said softly. I wonder if all 5 of your families joined together will be enough to handle even half of my strength. The room erupted. People gasped, their eyes bulging in disbelief. This wasn't just arrogance anymore. It was a death wish. After the 5 families formed the Jinling Business Alliance, their combined power had multiplied. Even individually, any one of them was a titan. To think a single man could challenge their collective authority was pure insanity. That was the first thought in everyone's mind. This man is a lunatic. They had seen my bloody methods tonight, but challenging these giants was a different level of bold. I let my gaze sweep over the crowd once more. People recoiled, feeling the suffocating pressure of my killing intent. Life is short, I said with a thin smile. I pulled out a small booklet and shook it slightly. You all should cherish what time you have left. After all, there isn't much of it remaining. A cold chill swept through the hall. Throats went dry. No one dared to breathe. I came here today mainly to say hello, I continued after a long pause, and to deliver a meeting gift. A gift? Everyone looked confused. Nothing I had done since entering suggested I was in a giving mood. Right then, a massive, burly man walked in carrying a heavy black bag. He opened it and began placing items on a table, lining them up with surgical precision. It was Su Feng. He didn't say a word. When he finished, he turned and walked away. The crowd's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. There, sitting on the table, were 5 funeral tablets. The names were already carved into them: Zhang Zhenlin, Sun Chongming, Yang Jingtai, and Chen Jianlong. These were the heads of the 4 great families. Jiang Wenli's eyes locked onto the 5th tablet. His own name was etched into the wood. He stared at it, frozen. He had seen his name thousands of times, but never like this. It carried a dark, invisible weight that sparked a primal fear in his chest. In a few months, it will be the anniversary of my foster parents' passing, I said, my voice casual. I will give them a grand reburial. When that day comes, I'll personally send you all down to apologize to them. Consider these small gifts an early preparation. Dead silence. No one dared to make a sound. These next few months are the final moments I'm granting you, I added. Of course, you're welcome to try and fight back. My words were blunt, but the directness made them more terrifying. Even men like Jiang Wenli and Chen Zihao, who had seen everything, felt their legs shaking. Their faces were ashen. I should warn you, though, I said. So far, no one I've set my sights on has ever escaped. I'm giving you a heads up now so you have time to prepare. Bring everything you have. Use every bit of your legacy to fight me. I looked around the room and gave a polite nod. Tonight was a bit abrupt. I've ruined the mood of your party. For that, I apologize. I sounded like a perfect gentleman. It was impossible to reconcile this polite version of me with the man who had just promised a massacre. I turned and began to walk toward the exit. But some people just can't help themselves. You have a big mouth. Chun Zaheo screamed, pointing a finger at my back. A lowly ant like you thinks he can touch the four families? Where do you get the nerve? Do you think you can win just by talking? I stopped. I turned my head slightly, a warm, gentle smile playing on my lips. I've never liked it when people point at me. Despite my smile, Chun Zaheo's entire body went cold. So, I said, I'll be taking that hand. I resumed my walk toward the door. As I moved, I casually brushed a speck of dust off my sleeve. It was a careless, effortless motion. A blood-curdling scream tore through the hall. Chun Zaheo's eyes went wide with horror. He watched as his right arm, the one he had used to point at me, was severed cleanly at the shoulder. It hit the floor with a wet thud, and blood began to spray everywhere. Was I a madman? Or a demon? Since I had arrived, I had slapped socialites, taken Sun Yu's life with a flying knife, sentenced Jung Chunmei to death, and now, I had taken Chun Zaheo's arm on my way out. I didn't look back. My coat fluttered as I reached the entrance, leaving them with nothing but the sight of my back. Only after I disappeared did Jiang Wenli feel the crushing weight lift from his chest. He gasped for air, feeling like he had just escaped a predator's jaws. Who is he? Jiang Wenli hissed. He couldn't understand who Lin Shiyu's brother really was. He knew I had served in the southern border, but that was it. His fear quickly curdled into a poisonous resentment. I don't care what kind of god or ghost you are. If you cross me, I'll send you to join those old corpses. He had spent 6 months building his empire on the bones of the Lin family. With the alliance behind him, he didn't believe anyone in Jinling could actually take him down. He hated how he had lost his composure tonight. He wasn't alone. He had the 4 families. I had killed a son and crippled a Chun. They would want my head. Jiang Wenli took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. If anyone breathes a word of what happened tonight, he threatened the guests, I guarantee your body will be floating in the Jinling River by morning. The guests scrambled to leave, not even stopping to say goodbye. They knew Jiang's reputation. But as the hall cleared, Jiang noticed his mother twitching violently. Her face was twisted in agony. Before he could even react, her breath hitched and stopped. She was dead. Jiang Wenli's eyes turned bloodshot. He let out a low, guttural growl. Chuyu, you killed my mother. I will not rest until you are dead. I walked out of the hotel entrance, the cool night air hitting my face. Behind me, I heard a familiar voice calling my name. Chuyu. I turned around and saw Tan Xiao running to catch up. I let a warm smile touch my lips. To anyone else, I looked like a completely different person from the cold-blooded soldier who had just terrorized a ballroom. Thank you for looking after Shiyu while I was gone, I said softly. I'm sorry I didn't have time to properly catch up with you tonight. Tan Xiao shook her head, smiling back. Shiyu is like a sister to me. When she fell on hard times, I couldn't just stand by. But Shiyu, you've offended the 4 great families and Jiang Wenli. You need to be careful. Before she could spiral into worry, I pulled out a business card and handed it to her. This is my card. You can reach me anytime. It's getting late, so please give my regards to your grandfather. I'll visit him personally another day. I turned and walked away, leaving her with the sight of my back fading into the shadows. The autumn leaves swirled in the breeze. Tan Xiao stood there, her mind a mess of conflicting emotions. The silent, introverted boy she once knew had become a total stranger. She watched until I disappeared into the darkness, then looked down at the card in her hand. There was no name, only the gold-embossed image of a soaring dragon, looking so lifelike it seemed ready to fly off the paper. On the back was a string of more than 20 digits, an encrypted military number. Her friend, Qin Miling, leaned in with a mischievous grin. Earth to Xiao, don't tell me you're still head over heels for him after all these years. Stop talking nonsense. Tan Xiao snapped, though her face flushed. I'm just wondering, what did he go through these past 10 years? He feels like a completely different person. 10 years is a long time, Miling mused, tilting her head. A lot can change. Tan Xiao Xiao stared at the dragon on the card. I have a feeling Jinling is about to be swept up in a bloodbath. His identity, it's definitely not as simple as it looks. I climbed into the car, where Su Feng was already waiting. He glanced at Tan Xiao Xiao in the distance and gave me a playful look. Boss, you rarely give out your personal card. Then again, that lady is quite the beauty. I shot him a cold glare. Is your skin itching for a beating? Su Feng shut his mouth instantly, though he couldn't help but marvel internally. Tan Xiao Xiao probably had no idea how much power was contained in that tiny piece of paper. I gave her the card because I'm grateful she cared for Shiyu, I said, looking out the window. And when the Lin family fell, her grandfather was one of the few people who dared to speak up for justice. Justice still exists in this world, Su Feng. There just aren't many people left who are willing to uphold it. When I arrived back at the Luoxiao Lake Villa, I found Lin Shiyu waiting at the door. Her face was pale with panic. She looked like she had been sitting there for hours. Brother, where did you go? I was so scared. Her voice trembled. She had woken up to an empty house and feared that my return had all been a beautiful dream. I took her hand, my voice softening. Don't be afraid. I just had some business to take care of. Don't leave me again, she whispered. I pulled her into a hug, letting her head rest against my chest. I promise, I'm never leaving you again. The rest of the night, Su Feng and I cleaned the house. Shiyu had been living here alone with her injured legs, and dust had settled in every corner. As we worked, Shiyu followed me everywhere in her wheelchair, her eyes never leaving me, as if she feared I'd vanish if she blinked. This villa complex, Luoxiao Lake, was actually developed by my adoptive father, Lin Qingfeng. It was the most exclusive neighborhood in Jinling, and this specific house had the best view of the water. He had kept it for our family. Shiyu used to beg him to build a house by the lake because she loved watching the sunsets and eating the fresh fish from the water. By the time we finished cleaning, it was 10 o'clock. I told Su Feng to find a room and headed to my old bedroom. I showered and lay down, but while the night was quiet for me, it was a nightmare for the rest of the city. At the hospital, Chen Zihao lay bloodless and unconscious. He had lost too much blood, and his right hand was gone forever. His father, Chen Jinlong, stood over him with eyes full of murder. Whoever touched my son, I will find him if I have to flip Jinling upside down, he hissed. I will cut him into 1,000 pieces. Don't worry, master, his butler whispered. I've already sent men to track him. Finding one man in this city is as easy as reaching into a pocket. Meanwhile, at the Sun family ancestral home, Sun Yu's cold body lay under a white sheet. His father, Sun Chongming, stood trembling with rage. Since the Lin family fell, the four families had grown powerful by devouring their assets. No one dared to cross them. I don't care who you are, Sun Chongming roared. If I don't avenge this, I am not fit to be human. And at the Jiang villa, a coffin already sat in the courtyard. Jiang Wenli stood over his mother's body, his face twisted in a mask of agony and hate. I was going to let that bitch Lin Shiyu live, Jiang Wenli growled. But you forced my hand. I'll send both of you down to hell to join your parents. The next morning, I was up early for my morning run. It was a habit from 10 years in the military that I couldn't break. Su Feng ran right behind me. Boss, when are we moving against the four families? He asked. No rush, I replied, my pace steady. Let them suffer the torture of waiting for death first. Tell our men to keep a close eye on them and the Jiang family. Don't let a single person escape. Understood. After my run, I made breakfast. When Shiyu woke up, the smell of fresh soy milk, fried dough sticks, and millet porridge filled the air. A rare smile brightened her face. Wow, it smells amazing. I pushed her wheelchair to the table and began feeding her a spoonful of porridge. Brother, I can do it myself, she said, blushing. Just open up, I said gently. Su Feng, sitting across from us, looked like his eyes were about to fall out of his head. He couldn't reconcile this tender man with the god of war, who made entire armies tremble in fear. When I caught him staring, he quickly buried his face in his bowl. It was a warm, peaceful morning for us, but for the four families, the sun rose on a day of terror. That morning, the heads of the Zhang, Sun, and Yang families each received a package. Inside was a black funeral tablet. Carved into the wood was their own name. They stared at the tablets sitting on their bedside tables, a cold sweat breaking out across their backs. It felt like the god of death was staring directly at them. Sending a funeral tablet to a living person was the ultimate declaration of intent. They had heard about the adoptive son of the Lin family returning, but they hadn't taken it seriously. Now, they realized the nightmare was only just beginning. The news of what I'd done spread through Jinling like a cold front. I had killed the Sun family's young master and Jiang Wenli's mother. I had walked away after snapping Chen Ziheo's arm. The powerful families were starting to sweat. The Lin family tragedy had been buried for 6 months, but my return was digging it all back up. They were uneasy. Still, they leaned on their influence, convinced their status in Jinling made them untouchable. They started digging. They used every resource they had to uncover who I really was. But they found nothing but ghosts. All they could gather was that I had left Jinling years ago to join the army in the southern border. Beyond that, my life was a void. They didn't realize that my records were classified as top secret. To leak even a page of my history was an act of treason punishable by death. 10 years of constant warfare in the southern border had left me with a restless soul. Now that the fighting had stopped, I actually felt a bit bored. The weather was clear, so I decided to take Shiyu to the lake. I pushed her wheelchair along the shore of Sunset Lake, the breeze catching her hair. I set up my fishing rod and a small stool. "I'll catch us a few fish," I told her. "We'll have fresh stew for lunch." Shiyu beamed at me. Her smile was beautiful, but it cut through me like a knife. I felt a surge of guilt for everything she had suffered while I was away. Luckily, the fish were biting. Before long, I landed a fat, healthy perch. Shiyu cheered, her eyes lighting up with a joy I hadn't seen in years. Just as I was packing up, Su Feng arrived. He kept his voice low. "Boss, it's almost noon. The Dai family hasn't made a move yet." I looked at the lake, my expression flat. I gave them their chance. "Since I have nothing to do this afternoon, I'll pay them a visit personally." "Understood. I'll make the arrangements." While Su Feng made the calls, I took Shiyu home. The Dai family wasn't on the level of the 4 great families, but they were powerful enough to be arrogant. At their estate, Dai Chun was currently throwing a tantrum. His face was a swollen mess, missing several teeth. He was crying to his father, Dai Shipong, demanding my head on a platter. He wanted Tan Xiao Xiao to crawl to him. He didn't mention my connection to the other families. He just called me a stray dog from the Lin family. Dai Shipong was furious. In his mind, hitting his son was the same as slapping his own face. He didn't care who I was. He had ruled Jinling for years and wasn't about to be intimidated by a ghost. When his phone rang with an unknown number, he answered it with a snarl. "Who is this?" he barked. "It seems you've ignored my master's words." Su Feng's cold voice came through the receiver. He said that people who don't listen need to be taught a lesson. Dai Shipong sneered. "Chuyu is nothing but a loser from a dead family. He wants to challenge the Dai family. He's looking for a grave. He will be at your door at 2 o'clock, Su Feng said, then hung up. Dai Shipong looked at the phone and laughed. I was giving him a warning before showing up? It was either ultimate confidence or pure insanity. He immediately began calling in his men. If I wanted to walk into his trap, he was happy to close it. Back at the house, the smell of perch soup filled the rooms. It was a taste from Shiyu's childhood. I sat with her, carefully picking every tiny bone out of the fish before placing the meat in her bowl. It was a quiet, happy meal. "Aren't you eating, brother?" she asked. "I'm not hungry," I said, feeding her another spoonful. "I have to head out for a bit this afternoon. Stay home and take care of yourself." She nodded gently. "Come back early." I left the house and got into the black SUV. Su Feng handed me his phone. "Boss, Dai Shipong set the meeting at a private manner. He's definitely got an army waiting for us." I smiled thinly. He went through all the trouble of setting the stage. It would be rude not to show up. 20 minutes later, we pulled up to the manor. The guards at the gate glared at us, their hands hovering near their belts. I didn't give them a second glance. I walked straight inside. The main hall was grand and oppressive. A woman in expensive silk sat facing the door, her face twisted in a permanent scowl. This was Ren Shijiao, Dai Chen's mother. She was flanked by 20 muscular men in black suits, hired thugs the Dai family used for their dirty work. Next to her sat her nephew, Ren Hui, and his sister. They had come to watch the arrogant fool get what was coming to him. I walked to the center of the room and sat down directly across from Rin Shijiao. I didn't look at the guards. I didn't look at the cousins. To me, they were just background noise. Rin Shijiao stared at me. I heard you were arrogant. Seeing you now, the rumors were true. You beat my son and actually had the nerve to show up here? I felt a small smile tug at my lips. I didn't bother explaining myself. I've walked into royal palaces and enemy bunkers without breaking a sweat. This manner was nothing. Renhui stood up, pointing a finger at me. You piece of trash. You lay a hand on my cousin and think you can just sit there? Get on your knees and apologize. Then we'll decide how to kill you. I didn't look at him. I pulled out a cigarette and lit it, taking a slow, rhythmic drag. The smoke curled in the air between us. Last night, I said quietly, someone else told me to get on my knees and apologize. I looked him in the eye, my expression turning cold. He's dead now. The room went silent. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. They looked at me, stunned by the sheer weight of my words. They thought I was joking. They were wrong. The room suddenly felt much colder. I watched the realization dawn on them. They finally connected the dots. Sun Yu was dead, and the mysterious powerhouse who had ended him in the upper circles of Jinling was standing right in front of them. Daichen hadn't mentioned that part, but for people like them, secrets were hard to keep. I looked at Ren Hui with a half-smile. Now, I asked quietly, do you still want me to get on my knees and apologize? Ren Hui froze. His body went rigid, and his face turned a sickly shade of gray. If I was really the man who killed Sun Yu, he knew that one more wrong word would make him the next corpse. Pure arrogance. Rin Shijiao snapped, breaking the silence. She had spent years climbing the social ladder in the Dai family. She wasn't as easily rattled as the younger generation. You've already offended the Sun family, and now you have the nerve to run wild in the Dai household? You're tired of living. She narrowed her eyes. To her, I wasn't a threat. I was an opportunity. If she broke me here and handed me over to the Sun family, it would solidify the bond between their two houses. The Dai family was wealthy, but they weren't at the very top yet. This was her chance to bridge that gap. You piece of trash, Daichen spat, his teeth clenched. You're still putting on an act? If you're smart, you'll disable your own arms and legs right now. Maybe then I'll let you suffer a little less. Rin Shijiao adjusted her posture, looking down at me like a judge presiding over a common criminal. My son has never been touched by anyone, not even his parents. Tell me, how should I handle someone as delusional as you? I remained calm, my expression unreadable. Aren't you going to ask why I hit him? I don't care why, she sneered. I only care about the fact that you laid a hand on my son. Don't you know the status of the Dai family in Jinling? A young woman chimed in with a mocking laugh. It was Rin Xian, Rin Hui's sister. You're actually trying to talk about right and wrong? You must be brain damaged. Rin Shijiao nodded in approval. I let out a dark, amused chuckle. So, no matter what he does to others, no one is allowed to touch him? If they do, it's always their fault? Is that the logic? At least you're starting to understand, Rin Xian said. With our family's power and connections, even if my son does something wrong, nobody dares to move a single hair on his head. It was pure, unadulterated arrogance. In most cases, she was right. Nobody in this city would dare cross them. Unfortunately for them, they had met me. I see, I said. I picked up a pair of chopsticks and grabbed a small piece of beef from a nearby serving platter. I chewed it slowly, savoring the flavor while the room watched me in stunned silence. A stray dog should act like a beggar, Daichen mocked, regaining his confidence. If you crawl on the floor and beg like a dog, I might get happy and throw you a bone to gnaw on. I shook my head and set the chopsticks down. The ingredients in this house aren't fresh enough. You, Daichen's face turned purple with rage. Rin Shijiao toyed with an expensive emerald bracelet on her wrist. Her voice was cold and commanding. I'll give you one last chance. Break your own hands, and I might stop pursuing this. Otherwise, don't dream of walking out that door alive. My time is precious. I'll give you 5 minutes to think. She stood up, looming over me. I don't like wasting time either, I said. I'll give you my answer right now. Ren Hui laughed, a harsh, grating sound. I thought you were actually tough. Turns out you're just another coward who buckles when things get real. I overestimated you. The words had barely left his mouth when the air shifted. A dull thud echoed through the room. Ren Hui didn't even see me move. He was suddenly airborne, flying backward like a broken doll. A spray of blood and several teeth trailed behind him. He slammed into a wall 10 meters away and slumped to the floor, motionless. The room went deathly quiet. Rin Shijiao stared, her eyes wide with disbelief. I was still sitting in the same spot, my posture unchanged. Even the ash on the tip of my cigarette hadn't fallen. It was as if I hadn't moved at all. You have your rules, I said softly into the silence. And I have mine. You, how dare you? Rin Shijiao stammered. I tried to give you a chance to live, but you're ungrateful. You're dead. You're absolutely dead. I ignored her. I stood up slowly, crushing my cigarette in the ashtray. I began walking toward her, one deliberate step at a time. With every step I took, the pressure in the room intensified. Rin Shijiao began to tremble. Her breath hitched. To her, I was no longer a man. I was a predator, a beast closing in for the kill. The coldness radiating from me made her spine turn to ice. What are you doing? She whimpered, backing away. I didn't answer. I reached out my hand. Behind me, Su Feng understood immediately. He pulled a pair of pristine white gloves from his pocket and handed them to me. I pulled them on, smoothing the fabric over my fingers. No matter the reason, no matter the right or wrong. Just because of your family name, your bullying son shouldn't be punished? I reached her in a flash. Slap. The sound of my hand hitting her face was like a gunshot. I really want to know, I said, my voice low. Who taught you that logic? You lowly dog, she screamed, clutching her reddening cheek. You dare hit me? Slap. I hit the other side of her face. To be honest, I said, looking at my gloved hands, touching you directly would have made my hands dirty. That's why I put these on. The entire room was paralyzed. Rin Xian tried to speak, but her throat was dry, her limbs shaking too hard to move. You dare humiliate me like this? Rin Shijiao hissed, her face bruised and distorted with pure hatred. Do you have any idea what kind of disaster this will bring upon you? I'd love to find out, I replied. Rin Shijiao had lived for decades as the Madame Dai of Jinling. Everyone she met treated her with the utmost respect. Now, she had been slapped repeatedly in her own home, and her attacker had told her she was too filthy to touch. What are you all standing there for? She screamed at the guards, her voice cracking with fury. Kill him. Tear him apart. The 20 muscular men snapped out of their shock. They were terrified of my speed, but they had no choice. They charged all at once, a wall of black suits and clenched fists. I didn't even break my stride. I simply tapped my foot against the floor. A shockwave ripped through the room like a clap of thunder. The guards were thrown backward as if hit by an invisible truck, crashing into tables and chairs, scattering furniture everywhere. I looked at Rin Shijiao. She was the only one left standing. If the slap I gave earlier shocked the room, what happened next turned me into a monster in their eyes. With one casual kick, I sent a dozen muscular guards flying backward. They hit the floor and didn't get back up. The silence that followed was heavy. People stared at me, their faces pale, wondering what kind of creature I actually was. Rin Shijiao finally seemed to wake up. She didn't know my background, but she could feel the cold reality sinking in. I was someone she couldn't afford to provoke. I didn't say a word. I simply walked back to my seat and poured myself a fresh cup of tea. Dai Chun, on the other hand, looked like he'd seen a ghost. He was terrified, his heart pounding with a sudden, sharp regret. He shouldn't have been so reckless. It wasn't that he was ready to forgive me, but he realized he should have let his father handle this from the start. He looked at me. We were about the same age, yet I crushed him in every possible way. Seeing the situation turn south, he tried to slip away while I wasn't looking. He didn't even make it 2 steps. His body flew backward through the air with a heavy thud, landing right at my feet. As he tried to scramble up, I pressed the sole of my polished leather shoe firmly onto his chest. Call your father, I said, my voice calm and steady. If I don't see him in 10 minutes, you'll have to live with the consequences. The room went deathly silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Facing me was like facing a demon, and no one dared to even breathe loudly. Dai Chun didn't waste a second. He fumbled for his phone and made the call. I'm a bit hungry, I said, peeling off my gloves and tossing them to Su Feng. Give me a bowl of noodles. Rin Shijiao watched me sitting there, steady as a mountain, with her precious son pinned under my boot. Her anger was boiling over. You're really going to war with the Dai family? She hissed, her voice trembling with indignation. Oh, I added, looking at Su Feng. About my noodles. Don't put any vinegar in them. The guests looked at each other, baffled. My moods shifted faster than the pages of a book. One moment I was slapping the elite of Jinling, and the next, I was casually ordering lunch as if nothing had happened. You won't get away with humiliating me like this. Daichin screamed from under my foot. I ignored him. If you're smart, you'll let me go now. Maybe there's still room to talk. I didn't even look at him. He kept rambling, convinced that the mere mention of the Dai family name would make me hesitate. He didn't realize that to me. He wasn't even worth a glance. A few minutes later, the noodles arrived. It was a simple dish, thin noodles, a rich broth, a bit of lard, and a spoonful of soy sauce from the old Chun family shop at the bridge, topped with 2 crisp stalks of bok choy. I had traveled thousands of miles and tasted delicacies from across the world, but nothing compared to the Yanchun noodles of my hometown. They tasted like the ones my foster mother used to make. It was a flavor I knew I'd never truly have again. I cleaned my chopsticks with tea and began to eat. The crowd was stunned. I was really sitting there, cool as a breeze, eating noodles while waiting for the head of the Dai family to arrive. I ate slowly, savoring every bite. I knew Dai Shipong was on his way with reinforcements, but I didn't feel a shred of pressure. Halfway through the bowl, I heard a rush of footsteps outside. I glanced at my watch. 9.5 minutes. A large group of men burst into the hotel. Leading them was a man in a gray suit, his hair graying at the temples. This was Dai Shipong. Behind him were dozens of young men armed with clubs. To his right stood a long-haired man with his arms crossed, his eyes sharp and cold. Dai Shipong's eyes first landed on his wife, Ren Shijiao, who was clutching her bruised face in tears. Then he saw his guards scattered across the floor. Finally, his gaze followed my leg down to where my shoe was still planted on his son's chest. He looked at my back as I continued to eat my noodles without looking up. Master, they've arrived, Su Feng whispered. I nodded but didn't stop. Right now, nothing was more important than finishing my meal. I want to see where you get the nerve to challenge my family. Dai Shipong bellowed, marching toward me. Who do you think you are? I slowly set down my chopsticks and used a napkin to wipe my mouth. You're Chuyu? Dai Shipong was shaking with rage, pointing a finger at me. How dare you touch my wife and son? If you don't give me a satisfactory explanation today, you aren't leaving this room alive. I looked at him and offered a thin smile. I just felt they lacked upbringing. I decided to help you teach them some manners. Dai Shipong's face twitched. You arrogant brat. My wife is known throughout Jinling for her grace and virtue. My son has been raised with the strictest discipline. I know exactly how they behave. Even if they did something wrong, it's not for an outsider to handle, especially not a stray dog like you. He stood tall, his ego filling the room. I smiled again. Now I understood why the son was the way he was. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I see now why your family acts this way, I said softly. Dai Shipong scoffed. He thought it was hilarious. In Jinling, who dared to touch the Dai family? Most people would swallow their pride and run the moment they heard his name. He couldn't tell if I was incredibly brave or just incredibly stupid. Watch your mouth. Daichin barked, feeling bold now that his father was there. You don't know who you're dealing with. My father, even showing up to see a loser like you, is a blessing for your ancestors. You should be on your knees. Ren Shijiao glared at me with venomous eyes, already picturing the way she would torture me once I was captured. I just sighed. So this was the grace and virtue of the elite. You think you can interfere in my family's business? Dai Shipong growled. I shook my head. Your family's business has nothing to do with me. But they provoked me. That makes it my business. So what if we did? Dai Shipong stepped closer. I'm going to break you today. I looked at him with a playful glint in my eyes. Tell me, what happened last night? I just happened to kill a self-righteous brat named Sun Yu recently. I said, my voice casual, as if discussing the weather. I wonder, how does your Dai family compare to the Sun family? Dai Shipong froze. His eyes went wide, and he immediately whipped his head toward his son, Dai Chun. The look of pure terror in the boy's eyes gave him the answer he needed. It was true. In Jinling, the Dai family was powerful, sure. But compared to a top-tier titan like the Sun family, they weren't even in the same league. And yet, This man in front of him had killed Sun Chongming's youngest son. Was he insane? Did he have a death wish? Dai Shipong looked back at me, but this time, he felt a chill run down his spine. He saw it in my eyes, a cold, piercing, killing intent. He had spent years fighting his way to the top, so he knew that look when he saw it. I didn't say another word. I picked up the pair of bamboo chopsticks I had used to eat my noodles. Then, I slowly lifted my foot off Dai Chen's chest. The boy felt a surge of relief, thinking I was finally backing down because I was scared of his father. He didn't even have time to smile. I flicked my wrist, and a bamboo chopstick blurred through the air. It tore straight through Dai Chen's left forearm and buried itself halfway into the concrete floor. A blood-curdling scream ripped through the air. You're looking for death. Dai Shipong's face twitched with rage. He couldn't believe I would strike right in front of him. This is a lesson, I said calmly. There are people in this world the Dai family simply cannot afford to provoke. I flicked the second chopstick. It whistled through the air and pierced Dai Chen's right forearm, pinning him to the ground like an insect. Blood began to pool on the gray concrete. Dai Chun howled like a slaughtered pig. Dad, kill this bastard. I want him to suffer. Make him beg for death. He was drenched in cold sweat, his face twisted in agony. He was forced into a pathetic kneeling position, both arms nailed to the floor. The great young master Dai had never known such humiliation. This is the price for not listening, I said, looking directly at Dai Shipong. I had told him to come and apologize before noon. He didn't. This was the consequence. Throughout the whole thing, I remained perfectly still, my expression as calm as a quiet lake. Dai Shipong's eyes were bloodshot. The veins on his forehead looked ready to burst. You animal. If I don't make you suffer today, I'm not fit to be a man. He waved his hand, and dozens of henchmen armed with clubs rushed forward. They surrounded me, looking fierce, but they all hesitated. They looked at the two bamboo chopsticks driven deep into the solid concrete and felt a wave of dread. Anyone who could do that was not a normal human being. Just then, a long-haired, middle-aged man who had been standing silently next to Dai Shipong stepped forward. Arrogant brat, you don't know the heights of the heavens. He snorted and lunged at me like a gust of wind. This man had been with Dai Shipong for years. No one knew his origin, but his status was incredibly high because of his overwhelming strength. He reached out with his right hand, curved like an eagle's claw, aiming for the back of my head. I didn't even turn around. I sat there, steady as a mountain. Suddenly, a massive figure appeared behind me. Su Feng's eyes flashed with a deadly light as he threw a heavy, thunderous punch. The long-haired man's expression changed instantly. He tried to pivot, but it was too late. Boom. It sounded like a car crash. The man was sent flying backward, his right hand mangled and dripping with blood. Su Feng let out a mocking laugh. With skills like that, you actually dared to move against him in front of me? The crowd was stunned. They knew how powerful that man was, yet he had been crippled by a single punch. Don't waste our time, Su Feng said, rolling his shoulders. All of you, come at once. He slowly unbuttoned his overcoat, revealing a dark green military uniform underneath. The room went dead silent. Everyone stared at the insignia on his shoulder, their eyes nearly popping out of their heads. A general? Someone whispered. To these people, a general was a godlike figure who could block out the sun with one hand. And this man was just a follower? Dai Shipong's mind went blank. He looked at me, sitting there motionless, and felt a wave of icy terror wash over him. If the subordinate was a general, then who was I? Who are you? Dai Shipong's voice was dry. He looked like he was about to drop dead from fear. Oh, you're losing your nerve now. Su Feng smirked. What happened to all that talk from before? Come on, I need the exercise. In the southern borders, Su Feng had been my vanguard, a true battle maniac. No, I wouldn't dare, Dai Shipong stammered, his entire body shaking. His henchmen quickly backed away, hiding their clubs behind their backs, their previous arrogance completely gone. I turned to look at Dai Shipong. Now, can we have a proper chat? Please, sir, speak. I am listening, Dai Shipong said, bowing and scraping. He immediately ordered all his men to leave the room. His heart was pounding. He had almost forgotten that the Lin family had an adopted son named Chuyu. After 10 years, the confidence and aura I carried were beyond his comprehension. The Dai family was big in Jinling, but against someone with this kind of military backing, they were nothing. Your son said meeting him was a blessing for my ancestors, I said nonchalantly. He said I should be on my knees. Dai Shipong broke into a cold sweat. He hadn't realized how suicidal his son's words had been. Mr. Chu, there's been a misunderstanding. Please, let me host a banquet to apologize. Give me a chance to make it right. The Dai family's gates are too high for me, I replied. I wouldn't want to overreach. Dai Shipong flinched. He knew I wasn't going to let this go easily. I'm not a man who loves killing, I said, standing up. Consider today a warning. But if I ever hear of the Dai family bullying the weak again, I will execute you without hesitation. Those last words hit them like a bolt of lightning. By the time they recovered from the shock, Su Feng and I were already gone. We drove back to Sunset Lake. As I stepped out of the car near the villa, a small, graceful figure came running toward me. Brother, I missed you so much. She was about 13 or 14, with twin ponytails, looking like a delicate porcelain doll. She lunged at me like an octopus, wrapping her arms around me. A rare, soft smile touched my face. You're getting too old to be this clingy, I said, lightly tapping her head. Where are your manners? I don't care, she chirped. Her name was Xiao Qi. I had found her 5 years ago on the southern border. Thousands of enemy troops had raided the border villages, and by the time I arrived with my men, we were too late. Entire villages had been slaughtered. I found her buried under a pile of bodies, the sole survivor of a massacre that claimed hundreds of our people. I found Xiao Qi with only a single breath left in her body. Back then, my rage was absolute. I led a 100-man elite squad on a midnight pursuit, tracking the enemy for miles. By the time the sun rose, I had left tens of thousands of enemy troops dead at the border. I didn't leave a single one alive. That was the battle that earned me the title of the Butcher among enemy nations. Xiao Qi had a severe head injury and stayed in a coma for 7 days before she finally woke up. That was why I named her Xiao Qi, Little Seven. She survived, but she lost most of her memories, only remembering scattered fragments of her past. Her body also stopped growing, frozen forever in the form of a 13-year-old girl. By my count, she should have been 18 by now. Over the years, she studied medicine obsessively, hoping to find a way to fix herself. To her, I was the most important person in the world. Brother, why did you call me here? Did you miss me? Xiao Qi asked, pressing her head into my palm like a curious kitten. I did, I said, stroking her hair. But I also need your help. My sister is hurt. I need you to heal her. Xiao Qi stiffened. Her expression crumbled, as if someone had just stolen her favorite toy. But, isn't Xiao Qi your sister? Do you have a lot of sisters? I smiled gently and pinched her cheek. I only have 2. One I grew up with, and one I pulled out of a pile of bodies at the border. Xiao Qi's jealousy vanished instantly. When I took her to see Lin Xiyu, her eyes filled with tears. She didn't see a rival. She saw a kindred spirit. Sister, don't be afraid, Xiao Qi whispered, taking Xiyu's hand. I'll work really hard to fix your legs. I felt a surge of hope. Over the years, Xiao Qi hadn't just studied under military doctors. She had also learned from the mysterious healers of the southern border. She hadn't cured herself yet, but she had saved countless soldiers on the battlefield. Brother, her legs have been injured for over 6 months, Xiao Qi reported after an examination. Her voice was full of pity. She's severely malnourished, and her body is very weak. I knelt down and took Xiao Qi's arms in my hands. She's my sister, just like you. Promise me you'll fix her. Don't worry, brother. I'll give it everything I have. Xiao Qi quickly wrote a list of medicines for Su Feng to buy. We had to stabilize Xiyu's health before we could attempt surgery, but with Xiao Qi there, a weight lifted off my shoulders. A few days later, I was playing chess with Su Feng in the courtyard. I beat him 3 times in a row. Lord, playing against you is just pure torture, Su Feng complained, throwing down his piece. I'm done. No more. I chuckled. I knew I was being hard on him, but I was bored and needed to kill time. Any movement from the 4 families or the Jiangs? The Jiangs and the sons are holding funerals, Su Feng reported. The others are staying quiet. I lit a cigarette and exhaled a cloud of smoke. Go order 2 coffins. Send 1 to each family. Su Feng looked confused. Send coffins? 2 cheap, thin-skinned wooden coffins, I clarified. Tell them they must use my coffins for the burials. I took a long drag and changed the subject. Did you find the person I asked for? Not yet, but the brothers are searching everywhere. If he's still in Jinling, we'll find him. I was looking for Zhao Shiji, the only true friend I had growing up. After the Lin family fell, he had vanished. My gut told me his disappearance was linked to my family's ruin. The fact that my men couldn't find a trace of him after several days made my brow furrow. I had a bad feeling that Shiji was already in deep trouble. Over at the Jiang family villa, the air was thick with the smell of burning funeral paper and the sound of mourning. Jiang Wenli had told the world his mother, Zheng Chunmei, died of a sudden heart attack. Those who knew the truth stayed silent. The mourning was interrupted when a crude, low-quality coffin was dropped at the entrance of the funeral hall. The message was clear. Jiang Wenli was ordered to bury his mother in it. Given the Jiang's wealth, they had already prepared a top-tier sandalwood casket. Jiang's face turned a sickly shade of purple. He knew this was my doing. He had wanted to bury his mother before settling scores with me, but I clearly wasn't going to give him that peace. At the same time, the Longshan funeral home was packed with the elite of Jinling. They were there for Sun Yu's funeral. The Sun family was an old power, far more influential than the new money Jiangs. They claimed Sun Yu died in a car accident. Sun Chongming looked like he had aged 10 years as he stood by his son's crystal casket. His wife was a sobbing wreck. I swear, Sun Chongming hissed through gritted teeth. If I don't tear that man apart, I don't deserve to be a father. The funeral was proceeding smoothly until 4 burly men marched in carrying a cheap wooden coffin. They slammed it onto the floor and walked out without a word. The Sun family stared at the shoddy craftsmanship in shock. Then, a sleek black van pulled up right next to the coffin. The crowd gasped. Everyone else had parked far away out of respect, yet this person drove straight to the door. It was a blatant provocation. The door slid open. A polished leather shoe hit the pavement, followed by a tall, handsome man in a sharp light blue suit. In a sea of black funeral attire, my bright suit was like a slap in the face to the grieving family. I had decided to come personally to see the young master son off. The atmosphere turned cold. Every eye in the room was fixed on me. Sun Yu, the eldest son and heir of the Sun family, stepped forward. "Did you send this coffin?" he asked, his voice dripping with ice. I glanced at the cheap wood and nodded. "A thin-skinned coffin for a waste of space. It's more than enough for your brother." The room erupted in whispers. I had just declared war in the middle of a funeral. Nobody in Jinling had ever been this bold. "You're here to cause trouble on purpose, aren't you?" Sun Yu demanded, sizing me up. I watched Sun Yu's face. He was already guessing who I was. I gave him a thin smile. I was the one who personally sent Sun Yu to his grave, so it only felt right that I show up to see him off one last time. The moment those words left my mouth, the air in the funeral hall turned freezing. Whispers rippled through the crowd like a wildfire. There had been rumors that Sun Yu didn't actually die in a car accident, and now, I had just confirmed them. Sun Yu's body went rigid. He stumbled back several steps, his eyes wide with realization. Your Chujingzhe? The name didn't mean much to most of the guests. But for a few older elites, memories started to resurface. They remembered the Lin family's adopted son. He had been gone for 10 years, serving in the military. They looked at me, taking in my towering frame and calm demeanor. So, the orphan had returned. But the Lin family was dead and buried. Even if I wanted revenge against the 4 great families, what could one soldier do against an empire? Presumptuous, a roar erupted from the memorial hall. Sun Chongming marched out, his face twisted with fury. His eyes were cold, filled with a murderous intent directed straight at me. "You dare come here to cause trouble? Today is my son's funeral. I don't have time for a bug like you. Take your trash and get out." I looked at the cheap coffin I'd brought. "The coffin is already here," I said, my voice flat but heavy with authority. "If you refuse to use it for your son, then I'll make sure you're the one lying inside it." The crowd gasped. The sheer arrogance of my statement left them breathless. I didn't wait for a response. I started walking toward the memorial hall. Each step I took seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. To the guests, it felt like my boots were slamming directly against their chests. Their faces went pale, and they scrambled backward to clear a path. I was just one man, but I moved with the momentum of a 1,000-man army. The Sun family guards rushed forward, glares fixed on me, teeth bared. The tension was a powder keg ready to blow. People in the back were still confused, whispering to each other about who I could possibly be to make the powerful Sun family this nervous. When the word spread that I was Lin Qingfeng's adopted son, the mood shifted from confusion to fear. They realized the fall of the Lin family wasn't just business, it was a blood feud. "He's got guts," someone whispered. "Coming here to spit in the Sun family's face?" For these people, reputation is everything. I kept walking, a faint smile on my lips. "Don't be so nervous," I said. "I'm just here to pay my respects." Nobody believed me. "What are you waiting for?" Sun Chongming's wife shrieked, rushing out with bloodshot eyes. "Throw him out. Kill him." "Son, you stepped closer to his father." "Dad, he came here to die. Let's take his head and offer it to my brother's spirit." Sun Chongming wanted to do exactly that. But as he looked into my eyes, he hesitated. He had ruled Jinling for decades and seen everything, yet he couldn't read me. I was too calm, too sharp. Beyond that, he had tried to use his connections to dig up my military record, and he'd found nothing. A total blackout. That kind of secrecy only belonged to the highest levels of power. He leaned in and whispered to his son, "Contact your uncle. Tell him to bring his men." His brother-in-law was a commandant in the local Jinling garrison and a top aide to the governor. He held real military power. If I was just a soldier, Sun Chongming figured a high-ranking officer could crush me into the dirt with a single phone call. "If you're smart, you'll kneel in front of my son's spirit and repent," Sun Chongming said coldly. "Do that, and I might consider giving you a dignified death." In Jinling, the Sun family didn't even need to lift a finger to destroy someone. There were always plenty of dogs eager to bark for them just to earn a few scraps. "Hey kid, didn't you hear Mr. Sun? Get on your knees." A short, chubby man named Huang Yu stepped out from the crowd. He had a sly look in his eyes and a smug grin. He saw this as his golden ticket. If he handled this troublemaker while Sun Chongming was too busy grieving, he'd be set for life under the Sun family's protection. "I don't care where you came from," Huang Yu barked, puffing out his chest. "Kneel down and apologize, or I'll personally teach you a lesson you won't forget." He looked around, enjoying the attention, acting like he was the hero of the hour. I didn't even look at him. I treated him like a stray dog barking at a passing car. My silence only made him angrier. He marched down the steps and got right in my face. "Are you deaf? I'm talking to you." The smug smile on Huang Yu's face froze. The entire courtyard went silent. People didn't just stop talking, they physically backed away. In a blur of motion, Su Feng had stepped forward. With a flick of his wrist, a gleaming silver dagger appeared. The cold steel was pressed firmly against Huang Yu's throat. Huang Yu's legs began to shake. The arrogance drained out of him, replaced by a paralyzing terror. "What did you say?" Su Feng asked. His voice was a low, predatory growl. "Say it again. I want to hear it." Su Feng was a head taller than the fat man and looked at him like he was already a corpse. "I've killed more people than I can count," Su Feng said, his eyes narrowing. "Every single one of them was 100 times stronger than you. Tell me, where did you get the courage to open your mouth?" I'm sorry," Huang Yu stammered. The feeling of the blade against his skin made his scalp go numb. "I was blind. I didn't know." He took a shaky step back. Su Feng didn't move. He didn't have to. If he wanted the man dead, there was nowhere on earth Huang Yu could run. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Huang Yu kept babbling, wiping sweat from his forehead as he scrambled back into the crowd, desperate to disappear. Huang Yu backed away until he felt safe from Su Feng's blade, finally letting out a shaky breath. He turned to vanish into the crowd, but a sudden, icy surge of killing intent locked onto him. Su Feng let out a cold snort. To Huang Yu, it sounded like the tolling of a funeral bell. His legs gave out completely. He collapsed onto his knees, trembling. "Please, have mercy. I was blind. I didn't recognize a great man when I saw one. Spare my life." He began slamming his forehead against the ground, over and over. It was a pathetic sight. Moments ago, he was a hero in his own mind, volunteering to kick me out just to suck up to the Sun family. Now his perfect plan was a joke. He was nothing but a coward. Sun Yu's face turned an ugly shade of purple. "Waste," he hissed at the kneeling man. Then he turned his glare toward me. "Chu Yu, where do you think you are?" You dare to use weapons and threaten lives here? Do you have no fear of the consequences? Everyone here is a witness to your crimes. I smiled thinly. I gave Su Feng a small nod, and he tucked the dagger away. We came here to pay our respects to the dead, I said softly, my voice carrying a hint of mock reproach. Let's not make things unpleasant. Then I looked up. I let my gaze sweep across the room, cold and sharp. But let's be clear. Even if I killed you right now, no one would dare to question my actions. Not a single soul. The room went dead silent. One moment I was polite. The next I was arrogant beyond belief. Bold words, a powerful voice boomed from the entrance. I'd like to see who exactly thinks they're above the law. The heavy doors swung open. A middle-aged man in a crisp military uniform marched in, followed by a dozen fully armed soldiers. The air in the room shifted instantly. The man scanned the crowd and locked eyes with me. His name was Gu Ming. He was a commandant under the command of Xue Su in the Jinling military region. He looked at me with cold, sharp eyes. Out of everyone in the courtyard, he knew exactly who the troublemaker was. I looked him over. This had to be the brother-in-law's son Chong Ming had mentioned, a commandant. It seemed I had slightly underestimated the Sun family's reach. "Uncle, Sun," you shouted, stepping forward. "This guy served a few years in the army and thinks he's a god. He's been picking fights and threatening us with knives. Arrest him." Gu Ming ignored him for a second, looking at us. "I heard you were soldiers. Which war zone?" "Southern Wilderness," Su Feng replied. His voice was like iron, ringing with a pride that came from his very soul. Gu Ming froze. The Southern Wilderness. In recent years, their reputation had skyrocketed, especially after the Battle of Wolf Valley a few months ago. That single battle had shocked the world and established the Southern Wilderness as the premier fighting force in the country. They were the undisputed kings of the military. And everyone knew why. It wasn't just the brave soldiers. It was because of one man, the governor of the Southern Wilderness, the legendary general known as the Azura God of War. In 100 years of history, he was the only commander who had never lost a single battle. "The Southern Wilderness is a fine place," Gu Ming muttered, his voice softening for a moment. "It has produced many talents, especially that God of War. He is destined for the history books." He caught himself and his face hardened again. "But as soldiers, your duty is to guard the borders and protect the people. Instead, you use your skills to bully civilians. You are a disgrace to the uniform. You're dragging the name of the Southern Wilderness through the mud." He stepped closer, his voice booming with righteous fury. "If you have any shred of shame left, surrender now. Come with me to face a military tribunal." With Gu Ming backing them, the Sun family found their courage again. Sun Yu straightened his back and pointed a finger at my face. "You dog. Keep acting tough. To the Sun family, you're nothing but an ant. You actually thought you could challenge us? You're looking for death." I didn't answer him. I simply reached down and smoothed a wrinkle on my sleeve. Then, I looked at Gu Ming. "Forget a small commandant like you," I said calmly. "Even if your boss, Xue Su, were standing here, he wouldn't dare speak to me like that. You're insane." Sun Yu screamed, emboldened by his uncle's presence. "Who do you think you are? Talking about Commander Xue like that? You're noisy," I muttered. Su Feng didn't wait. He moved like a flash and delivered a backhand slap that sent Sun Yu spinning through the air. He crashed into the ground several meters away, his face a bloody mess. I didn't even glance at him. He was air to me. Gu Ming's face went pale with rage. He waved his hand. "Presumptuous. Arrest them." The soldiers raised their rifles, surrounding us. I didn't blink. "Since you've heard of the Azura God of War," I said, my voice casual, "then you should know that no one on this earth interferes with his business." The words were quiet, but they hit Gu Ming like a physical blow. A chill ran down his spine. He stared at my face, calm, handsome, and utterly unshakable. A terrifying thought began to take root in his mind. Could it be? No, it was impossible. That man was a legend, a myth. Why would he be here in Jinling? But the aura I projected, that absolute dominance, it made his heart race with fear. "Call Xue Su," I told Su Feng. "I want to see him here in 10 minutes. The crowd gasped. I was giving orders to the top commander of the region? I had to be suicidal. But Su Feng just nodded respectfully. He pulled out a phone and dialed a number. It picked up almost instantly. "The Lord is at the Longshan funeral home," Su Feng said. Just 8 words. Then he hung up. At the Jinling military headquarters, Su's hand was shaking so hard he almost dropped his phone. To him, the title Lord weighed more than gold. Memories of blood, fire, and iron flooded his mind. He had thought he would never see his commander again after leaving the border. He didn't waste a second. He called for his car and raced toward the funeral home. In less than 10 minutes, a military jeep screeched to a halt at the entrance. Before it even fully stopped, a man in his 40s leaped out. He didn't walk. He ran toward us, his eyes red with emotion. "Lord, it really is you." It was Su. He stopped in front of me, snapped his heels together, and gave the most perfect military salute I had ever seen. Su, formerly of the Southern Wilderness Army, reporting for duty. The courtyard fell into a deathly silence. The air seemed to freeze. Gu Ming and the Sun family felt their blood turn to ice. Their skin crawled. The man they had been mocking, the man they tried to arrest, was the legend himself. I smiled and returned the salute. When I finished, I stepped forward and patted Su on the shoulder. "You've transitioned to a local post," I said with a grin. "Are you getting used to it?" As the top military official in Jinling, Su held a rank that made him a god in the eyes of ordinary citizens. But standing before me, a man much younger than him, he looked like a nervous student facing his headmaster. He was stiff, formal, and deathly serious. I asked him how he liked his new post. He sighed, admitting he missed the southern wilderness. He missed the brothers we fought alongside. He told me it was too quiet here. He longed for the days of galloping across the borders and the glory of battle. Su was one of my oldest subordinates. 3 years ago, he led a small team deep into enemy territory and ran straight into their main force. They fought like demons and eventually crushed the enemy, but the cost was soaked in blood. Most of his men died. Su barely survived with his life. His injuries were so severe he had no choice but to transfer to a local administrative role. On the night before he left the front lines, we sat by the border and drank until dawn. Even though he tried to act cheerful today, I could see the lingering sorrow in his eyes. For a soldier, the hardest thing to leave behind is the land you bled for. I knew Su was stationed in Jinling, but I hadn't planned on contacting him. I certainly hadn't expected the local garrison to interfere in my business. The nostalgia didn't last long. Su turned his gaze toward Gu Ming, his eyes narrowing. He could sense something was wrong. "Gu Ming," Su barked. "Why are you here?" Gu Ming stammered, his face turning pale. "Commander, I. He couldn't find the words. Su's expression darkened. He wasn't a fool. He knew exactly what had happened. These blind idiots had offended the Lord. If they had actually touched me, he would have skinned them alive. Su looked at me, ready to apologize, but I just waved my hand. "He's your man," I said calmly. "Deal with it yourself. I won't get involved." Cold sweat poured down Gu Ming's back. He and his soldiers were trembling so hard they could barely stand. The soldiers might not have known my exact identity, but Gu Ming did. He knew where Su had served. He looked at my age and my bearing. There was no doubt left. I was the peerless god of war, the Shura of the battlefield. Gu Ming felt sick. Just minutes ago, he had been lecturing me from his high horse. He had called me a disgrace to the uniform. He had threatened to arrest me. He realized now that if he had followed through, he would have died 100 times over for treason against a high-ranking commander. Sun Chongming didn't know my specific title, but hearing Su call me Lord was enough. He knew I was active duty high brass. When I turned my sharp gaze back toward the crowd, everyone lowered their heads. No one dared to meet my eyes. "I was the one who sent Sun Yu on his way," I said, my voice echoing in the silent hall. "It's only right that I come to see him off. Mr. Sun, you don't have an objection, do you?" Sun Chongming's face was frozen. He was speechless. Even if he had 10 times the courage, he wouldn't dare stop me now. I stepped onto the stairs and walked into the funeral hall. My presence filled the room, suffocating the guests. Even Sun Chongming opened his mouth several times to speak, but the words died in his throat. Today, he finally witnessed my arrogance and my power. He finally understood where the Lin family's foster son got the confidence to challenge the 4 great families and the Jiang family. To me, These powerful men were nothing more than ants. I walked to the center of the hall, with Su Feng right behind me. I looked at the expensive Phoebe Jinan wood coffin and the portrait of Sun Yu on the wall. I shook my head. The guests looked confused, but Su Feng knew what I was thinking. I felt that a piece of trash like Sun Yu didn't deserve such a high-quality casket. I reached out my hand. Su Feng immediately handed me a single stick of incense. Holding it with one hand, I turned slowly to face Sun Chongming. "Mr. Sun, losing a son at your age is truly tragic," I said with a thin smile. "I'm here to wish you many more days like this, year after year." The room gasped. This was a funeral. People usually offered condolences, not a curse for more deaths in the family. Sun Chongming's veins bulged in his neck. I was basically telling him I hoped his entire family would die off. But I wasn't done. I flipped my wrist and jammed the lit end of the incense upside down into the burner. In traditional customs, this was the ultimate curse. It meant the deceased would never find peace in the afterlife. "Chuyu, you go too far," Sun Chongming hissed, his eyes bloodshot with rage. "Do I?" I chuckled. "When your families conspired against the Lin family back then, did you ever think about going too far?" I began to walk around the coffin as if I were strolling through a private garden. Suddenly, I reached out and tapped the lid lightly. Cracks spread across the wood like a spider web. In a heartbeat, the entire expensive coffin disintegrated into a pile of sawdust. Sun Yu's body was exposed to the open air. "This coffin is a waste on him," I said. "The one I sent over is much more appropriate." If my words were disrespectful, breaking the coffin was an act of war. It was the ultimate humiliation for the Sun family. The guests were terrified. In all of Jinling, there wasn't another soul brave enough to do this in front of Sun Chongming. I'll kill you," Sun Chongming's wife screamed, lunging at me. Her husband grabbed her and held her back. "What? You can't handle this?" I asked, my face cold. Compared to the tragic deaths of my parents, I've been quite generous. At least I provided a casket. "Chuyu, what do you actually want?" Sun Chongming gritted his teeth. I patted the dust off my gloves. "You received my gift, didn't you? Keep it safe. You'll need it soon." Sun Chongming's face drained of color. He remembered the memorial tablet I had delivered earlier. "In a few months, it will be the anniversary of my parents' deaths," I continued. "I'm going to move their graves. And I'm going to use the heads of your families as an offering to them." My voice wasn't loud, but it carried to every corner of the room. A chill ran down everyone's spine. The Sun family looked like they were already dead. After a long silence, Sun Chongming finally broke. He lowered his head, his pride shattered. "You already killed my son. What more do you want?" "I'll give the Lin family's assets back. All of them." I laughed softly and shook my head. "The things that belong to the Lin family? I'll take those back myself." "Then what do you want?" he roared, unable to contain his fury. "I want everyone from the 5 families who participated in the persecution of the Lin family to pay with their lives. That's all." I flashed him a smile and walked out of the hall. I left behind a room full of people paralyzed by shock. Sun Chongming stumbled and fell to the floor, his strength completely gone. For years, the Sun family had ruled Jinling. No one dared to cross them. Now, a single young man was threatening to tear their world down. In the past, he would have called me delusional. But after seeing my ruthlessness today, he felt a fear he had never known before. Outside the hall, Xuesu was still waiting. Gu Ming and his men remained bowed, too terrified to even breathe. "Lord," Xuesu whispered as I approached. Xuesu hurried toward me. I wasn't ready to make my true identity public just yet, so I gave him a sharp look. I told him to stay behind and clean up the mess. He nodded solemnly, promising not to let me down. Once Su Feng and I stepped away, Xuesu's expression turned ice cold. He turned his gaze toward Gu Ming, who was still trembling on the floor. Xuesu called them a pack of blind idiots. He told them that even wasting a bullet on them felt like a loss for the country. Right then and there, he stripped Gu Ming and his men of their military ranks and ordered them to be court-martialed immediately. Xuesu had followed me through years of war. He didn't believe in mercy for traitors or fools. We moved to the Jinling Hotel, a century-old landmark sitting right on the edge of the Jinling River. It was a place where poets had gathered for generations, but today, it was just a quiet spot for 3 old soldiers to reconnect. I sat at the head of the table in a private room, with Su Feng and Xue Su on either side. We hadn't seen each other in years. Before the food even arrived, Xue Su downed 3 large bowls of wine. He slammed his bowl down, his eyes filled with guilt. He told me he hadn't known the Lin family were my foster parents. If he had, he never would have let that tragedy happen. I reached out and stopped him. It wasn't his fault. I didn't blame him. I only blamed myself for finding out the truth too late. Xue Su slammed his fist on the table and begged me to let him handle it. He promised that not a single person from those 5 families would escape. He had been my right-hand man in the southern border, and to him, I was a god. Even though he had left the front lines years ago, his loyalty hadn't faded an inch. I shook my head. I told him I didn't want any outside help for this. If I needed him for something specific, I'd have Su Feng reach out. Xue Su didn't push it further. He knew that even if the 5 families joined forces, they weren't even worth a flick of my wrist. He raised his bowl again, his voice thick with emotion. He asked me to send his regards to the brothers still serving in the southern border. He knew his days of fighting on the battlefield were over, and it clearly ate at him. I looked at him and felt a pang of sadness. People think soldiers love war, but we're the ones who pray for peace the most. We know exactly what it costs. Every time a war breaks out, it means more brothers won't come home to see the flag fly. I thought about the Battle of Wolf Valley. That was the place where I earned my title, but it was also the place where tens of thousands of my men were buried. I stood up, walked to the window with my wine bowl, and looked out at the rolling Jinling River. I poured the wine into the water, a silent tribute to the brothers who gave their lives for the country. We sat back down as the food arrived. I remembered something and told Xue Su I needed him to track someone down for me. I didn't bring many men on this trip, so I needed his resources. He stood up instantly, waiting for the command. I told him to sit down. We were off the clock. I gave him the name, Zhao Shiji. He was my best friend growing up. Xue Su sent the order out immediately. As we ate and drank, it felt like we were back under the stars in the southern border. Back then, life was simple, just survival and boredom, fueled by heavy wine. Xue Su's tolerance had clearly dropped since he left the military. After a few rounds, he had to excuse himself to the bathroom. When he came back, his face looked different. He leaned in and told me the Chun family had arrived. They were looking for me. I didn't even look up from my food. I told him to leave first. Su Feng knew the drill. If Xue Su stayed, his presence would scare them off too soon. And I wanted to see these little clowns dance before I crushed them. A moment later, I heard heavy footsteps in the hallway. The door was kicked open with a loud bang. Su Feng and I stayed seated, acting like nothing had happened. A bald, middle-aged man marched in, followed by half a dozen thugs. He pointed at me and snarled, calling me a dog, and saying he knew he'd find me here. I glanced at the group, but my eyes stopped on an old man standing behind the leader. He was thin, dressed in a gray robe, with dull, sunken eyes. I felt a slight ripple in the air. A martial artist. I was surprised a small family like the Chins had someone like that in their pocket. No wonder they were so arrogant. The bald man was Chun Jianhu, the brother of the family head. He was there to get revenge for what I did to his nephew, Chun Zihao. He screamed at me, asking if I was deaf or mute because I wasn't responding to his threats. I ignored him completely. I poured myself another bowl of wine and studied the liquid. I told Su Feng that the wine in the city just didn't have the same kick as the stuff back in the southern border. Su Feng nodded, laughing. He reminded me how the new recruits used to pass out after just one bowl. He even brought up an old comrade named Biaozi who used to be a doctor. We kept chatting, treating the armed thugs in the room like they were invisible.